In December, Storyblocks released our 2026 Video Trends Guide, and one thing stood out to me. Graphics and title design don't just reinforce the narrative of a video, in many cases they're actively shaping it. It seems obvious, but it's not an area I see a lot of editors being trained to think about or intentionally design for. So today, I'm sitting down with Ali Tomek, lead visual designer at Storyblocks and designer of the Trends Guide, to break down a few standout examples.
We chose 3 examples of title design in video that clearly reflect the trends in our guide, and we'll break down how each one brings these trends to life.
So Ali, thank you for being here.
Awesome, thank you for having me, Kyle. I'm super excited to share my passion for typography and title design. And yeah, this should be a super fun video.
And before we get into the breakdown, a quick reminder that you can download the full 2026 Video Trends Guide for free using the link above or in the description down below. All right, so this first example that we're gonna be taking a look at was a branded content piece by On Running and End Clothing. So we have a couple different frames here and some typography that we'll dive into a little bit later. Yeah, so what kind of stands out when you look at this title treatment here?
Yeah, so I think this is super interesting just because it is pretty subtle. So it really goes with that idea of mundane couture, where it feels pretty subtle, banal, but there's also this kind of little bit of visual interest through just the staggered type. So we see like in this one and then also in frames moving forward. Yeah, so you can tell like the type is always appearing in the same exact spot, like vertically on the video. So there's that kind of like repetition, predictability, but then you get a little bit of variation in terms of where these lines actually start. So they're staggered a little bit. And yeah, that kind of gives it like a poetic, lyrical quality.
Wow.
Where we have these really simple type treatments that are repeated throughout the video, but they start to feel almost like poetry or, you know, something with a little bit more kind of like a deeper meaning than just
simple titles.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I look at these from non-graphic designer background and just an editor, and I got the assignment like, all right, we need to convey this information. We need to put this text on the screen. Like there's a million different text treatments that you can do, and my lazy brain would say like, all right, let's just like do a little paragraph and like, what's the brand's font sizing that's typical for this size, and like let me just throw it in a title safe area that isn't in the main event. But that's so funny that even after I'd printed these out and I was prepping for this video, I didn't realize that, all right, they're keeping it in the exact same spot throughout. I think there's even the lower third. So they have this same area, and more than just the same area, what's really interesting and something that Ali kind of beat into me that I never really did before was look at where the titles are compositionally with the entire image as well, because often, like, again, my brain just goes, okay, I need to add a title to add a little bit of information. Let me just put it in a title safe area. But Ali's really good at saying, what's the whole complete composition and readability? So even if you could see that this title here, it's showing the snake hole and the title, and there's like the shadow side of the snake hole, which offers really good contrast with the title there. And it's not like this was just, like, I almost guarantee that the composition of this footage wasn't perfectly like that, and you might need to manipulate your footage a little bit in order to get that to fit, right?
So you mentioned like the compositions and how those are kind of working to create a holistic, interesting composition. I think these cutout circles are also super interesting, how they kind of shape or frame that composition, and also how they interact with the type. So they almost feel to me like, well, number one, like I said, framing devices. So like this is a great example, this one, where we have this like really interesting movement happening through the frame. They're carrying these like balloon type art pieces, which is really like, you know, the point of the video. Like as viewers, we want to look there. And then these circles are just kind of helping to reinforce that. They're sort of acting as this like asymmetric frame around the content. And they also kind of echo these like lines of type. So we have like 4 circles, we have 3 lines of type, feels very like numerical. They're the same color. So you sort of just start to notice like all of these different connections and resonances between different elements of the video, which I think is super cool.
Something that kind of sticks out to me is like what kind of intentionality might have come from where we're placing the circles. Like, is this a case where you just go, what does the circle look like here? What does it look like there? Or do you think that they're measuring things out within the frame?
Yeah, I think there seems to be a little bit of a looser system, which is like one way you can go about it. It doesn't have to be super rigorous. So when I say like looser system, it looks like we have like 2 circles that are sort of closer together, always at the top of the frame. Then we get one that's activating the bottom portion of the frame. And then we get sort of like this floater circle that's either on left or right, sort of more in like the central third of the frame.
I guess that's like the biggest thing I've learned from you is like, whatever decisions you're making, you can almost always like find a way to justify it almost, but like there needs to be a somewhat of a system in place that helps you make these decisions. And it actually makes the process easier. You don't have to think as much each time. You have almost a template.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so our next example is by Nike. It's titled Behind the Science, Nike Minds Technology, and it's a piece of branded content that we found on YouTube. So these are just some simple lower third treatments. Pretty simple at first glance. We have a title that is obviously larger than, or the person's name that's obviously larger than the title. The title is set in a monospaced font, which is something that I personally love and I think goes really well with the show your work trend. So monospace type is basically the idea behind it is that each letter form gets a consistent width. So it's kind of hard to explain without showing you, but if you look at like this type on top, that this is not monospaced. You can tell like each letter form, like for example, the M is a lot wider than an O. So yeah, there's like a variability to the width of each letter form. When we get to our teeny tiny monospace type down below where we have the title, now you can tell each letter form has the same exact amount of space.
Just as an example of, the monotype here, there is like these little elements. They do a really cool thing throughout this treatment of like flashing blueprints of the shoe. They're talking about, how the shoe was made. So you could see they have different blueprints throughout, and then they kind of flash these digital visualizers of it in various stages as well. And you can see a little bit of that monotype, I think, in the like kind of embedded in these as well.
Yeah, so the monospaced type definitely reinforces this idea of show your work. It's something we associate with technical documents, with industry. So it has a real feeling of like being behind the scenes and seeing something, get made in process or in progress. And it has that like industrial feel to it, but it also has kind of this charm or awkwardness through just that unique spacing. So there's a little bit of that, feeling of industrial parts that are like manufactured, but then there's also that feeling of like a very human feeling, charming, etc.
All right, now let's take a look at this.
Yeah, so this is super cool.
This is like the hero title sequence of the video here.
Yeah, so basically what's happening is like we start with just Nike, and then slowly it starts to kind of morph, and we get these like really interesting in between takes where the word Nike is essentially morphing into the word mind. So I think that one's last. This one, yeah.
I think that's the order.
And then, yep.
Yep. Pretty wild. It's a really, I was wondering what word you were going to use for, we start with Nike and then we morph, transition, dissolve, like, I don't even know exactly what you would call it. It almost looks three-dimensional. You're seeing the example right now. This transition almost looks three-dimensional, yet at the same time looks sketched like a blueprint. And I think that it just holistically fits the video really well.
Yeah.
Again, it's not, I think that as beginners in creating video, you have, okay, we got to put the logo on screen, right? There's a million different ways that you could show the logo for Nike. But this one was clearly very intentional. And it's also not on just straight white either. It has this really like, almost like a little bit of film grain to it, / paper texture from, that looks like it could have been from some of the blueprints scanned in there. And there's a small possibility that this actually is sketched or printed on ink and then filmed slowly over time.
Yeah, something else that's really interesting about this particular title treatment is just that it feels so architectural. It feels almost like, I don't know, a brutalist building or something made out of concrete, where it's like it's in black and white. We get these like really interesting kind of three-dimensional forms that feel like heavy, like they have an impact. Yeah, you can see, just in the color treatment, how well these titles tie into this particular frame from the video. Like we get the gray, the lighter gray, we have like the darker blacks that are definitely echoed in this particular frame. And yeah, they remind me of like shadows. There's just a lot of like different connections that are happening. And it is a pretty like simple title treatment in terms of like they could have, added a bunch of crazy colors. Yeah, simple does not mean easy. So.
And one piece of that too, I know that as video editors, you often think about the pipeline of, titles and stuff comes pretty late in the process typically, or at least when I'm creating video, it comes pretty late in the process. And usually by that point, I'm like, just get it done. And I think that's what elevates or will separate your videos even further, is like taking just as much care with the composition and the design decisions you're making with your titles as you did throughout the rest of the video, where you're scrutinizing frame by frame or when to cut or what beat to cut on. It really does have just as much of an impact on the overall piece.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that and say, like, start playing around with title treatments early on. Once you have kind of like a look and feel of your video, why not like jump in and just print out letter forms, start experimenting, cut stuff out, mess around in your program of choice, bounce off of each other. Maybe you find something that's working really well in the video, on the video side, or in the cinematography that you think, oh, that would be interesting if we like brought that back into the titles.
All right, so the final example that we're going to be taking a look at is from Apple, and it was their launch video for the AirPods Pro 3. So this one we thought was really, really interesting because this is the Apple Glass era. They're doing some really cool stuff with just the way that they're breaking things out into different light waves and adding color to this otherwise, just black and white composition. The way that they incorporate that with the sound as well is very cohesive. But there's so much to this. So where should we start, Ali?
We could start at the beginning, which is with the titles that I believe come on screen pretty early in the video. And yeah, at first, as you can see, they appear pretty simple, very simple. And then, yeah, they start to kind of morph, shift. It feels like lights, reflecting or refracting or, getting separated into different colors. So they sort of, at the start, set it up like, okay, this is just a simple treatment. And then they really take this technique of that kind of mirrors the idea of the liquid glass and go crazy with it. And there are all sorts of surprising, interesting things that sort of pop up that Kyle and I noticed in this video. So one cool thing, if you watch it a few times, you'll start to notice some of these forms that appear when the type is getting stretched and distorted and we get these colors. It's sort of I guess we have 3 ovals here, but we start getting these oval shapes that really mimic other frames in the video and that mimic the forms that you see in AirPods Pro. So you think of the AirPods Pro case and you open it up and yeah, the AirPods are kind of nestled into these little oval shapes. So it feels very connected to the product, which is really cool.
Yeah, not only the product, but sound waves. There's so much that's coming to my mind just as I'm sitting here and looking at these in person again too. What's really, the liquid glass component is cool because the way that the title moves like water or liquid would when it's being hit with sound. So you're getting a little bit of these jitters in the very beginning, and then you have a bit more of a bold stretch and movement. We said that the way that the P and the D kind of stretch out almost look like an AirPod design as well. So that's really unique and interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of playing with multiples, that just feels like this, almost like sound waves kind of pulsing out. So everything in this video just feels really intentional and connected, interconnected. You can see, here's the same frame.
It's the next iteration. Yeah, that's the next.
Oh, that's the next.
This is tighter.
Okay, yes,
so it spaces out and then it's a secure
Yeah.
fit. So it kind of comes in.
Okay, wait, this is interesting. I didn't notice this the first time. Just like you said, the spacing between the letter forms is it's obviously it's mimicking the AirPods, and then for the secure fit, it's coming closer together.
And in this particular video, there's no voiceover as well. This is just music and titles. So in order to make the titles engaging without distracting from the main visual, it's an announcement for the headphones. So they want your eyes to be on the product, but at the same time, they need to communicate what the product is about or what it's doing. And so in order to be really engaging, you need to tie your title to whatever that motion is and really have your subject of the video be complemented by the title. On that note, do you have any advice because I think it's really easy to sit here and say intentionality is key. It's another thing to practically do it. Do you have any advice on framing your mindset or type going into reviewing it with video? I'm trying to find a good way to say this, but little techniques that you can help yourself brainstorm thinking outside of the box with.
I mean, everybody's process looks different. There's no right way to do it. But I think during the way that I structure it is we have a time that's dedicated to playing around, not judging the work that you're creating, which is really hard. And then the second phase, you want to give it a little bit of distance, step back. That's when you kind of want to bring in the criticality, maybe ask other people, you know, how is this title treatment working with the video, get some feedback, get a second pair of eyes, and also just for yourself, kind of have a little bit more critical distance to be able to figure out what thing that you've created during the first stage, the play stage, is actually, you know, communicating the message and best serving the video.
All right, well, Ali, thanks again for joining me. This has been really fun to look at all of these different examples and see how they tie into the different trends that we identified.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And if you're still here watching, thank you. Hopefully this gave you some insight about how you can more intentionally incorporate some graphics into your videos. I'd love to hear in the comments down below what some of your favorite tips were. And don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next one.